this video I'm going to be looking at this. This is the 7Artisan's 4mm f2.8 prime lens, fully manual. If you want to find out what it's like, join me. Roll titles. Now, before we start YouTube, just a disclaimer. This video is sponsored insofar as 7Artisans have sent me through this 4mm f2.8 lens, and they've sent me through free of charge for review. Now, they haven't given me any instructions as to what they want me to say. They haven't told me anything. They haven't even told me the retail price of it yet. I've had to go out and try and find that out myself. I literally have had this sent through in a box and said, can you do a review on it? So the good thing with that is I can do an honest review, because I'm under no pressure to do it. So this is a sponsored video, but it'll be a straightforward review. If it's good, I'll tell you it's good. If it's bad, I won't hold back telling you it's bad either. Let's have a look at the video. Go on. Well, hi YouTube, Brian James, that Micro Four Thirds guy with you once again, and as I've just said, we're doing a review on this, which is the 7Artisan's 4mm f2.8 manual lens. So before we do anything, let's have a little look as to how I got it. Let's have a little look as to how it comes packed.
You know, there is something particularly satisfying about opening up a package when it's really nicely put together. And this lens has got a wonderful bit of packaging. Let's slide it open. First of all, it's tight, it's neatly put together. Now, one of the things that I used to love was when I got a new iPhone or an iPad, and I'm not sponsored by them, I'm just saying that this is what I use. One of the things that really used to interest me more than anything else was the fact that the packaging was always of such a fantastic level, such a fantastic quality. And this 7Artisan's 4mm f2.5 lens is reminiscent of that. The box is absolutely fantastic. Now, the lens isn't in the box at the moment. I've already taken the lens out. But, you know when you get that sort of feeling that the box doesn't really want to come apart? It's so well fitted together. It's so neat and so tight and so well put together. It's beautiful. Instructions on the top there. Nice bit of padding, and as I say, the lens is gone from it. But no straightforward foam padding, but what a wonderful little box. That makes a big difference to me. Well, packaging isn't everything. The lens itself is what we've actually looked onto this for. So let's have a look at the lens itself. I've got it attached to my EM1 Mark WAD, and I've been thoroughly enjoying actually using it this afternoon to see what it was like. First thing we notice, it's the lens cap. Big metal lens cap, and this is essential because, as I've just said, the lens itself protrudes quite highly. It's a very, very big dome, and we'll find out why in a few moments. But without this, there's no protection. You can't put filters onto this. There's no filter ring. So the lens cap itself gives it all the protection that you desperately need. The lens on this one is a Micro Four Thirds lens, and this is the anything I'm saying about the lens today is pertinent to Micro Four Thirds more than anything else because of the sensor size. It will react different on APS-C and full frame. So when we're talking about it, I'm talking about Micro Four Thirds sensors and how the image comes onto those. Take the lens off. All metal construction, all metal ring. You see that there's no contacts on the back. There doesn't need to be because both manual focus and manual aperture on this one. So there's no need for that. Put it back on the camera again. Take the lens cap off. As I say, we have the aperture ring, which has got a little lever. It's really neat, and it's very, very smooth and easy. It's probably about 20 degrees from one end to the other. But it's very smooth, very neat. It doesn't have any clicks on it. That can be a bit of a problem if you're trying to work out changing your, if you want to change your speed and still get the same exposure, because quite often you can take it down by a couple of clicks and move your aperture by a couple of clicks and know that you're still going to be around about the same exposure. You can't do that on this. If you want to see what your different exposure is, you've got to take your head away, look around the front. Not a big problem. The focusing ring on this one, again, very, very smooth. Goes from infinity down to 0.085 of a meter. I'll say that again. It goes from infinity to 0.085 of a meter, 8.5 centimeters. In fact, when you take it, when you take it towards infinity, the last numbering on there before infinity is 20 centimeters. And remember, that is from the focal plane.
So if I pop this lens off, I'll put the lens cap on just to give it a bit of safety, but if I put the lens cap off, just to remind you, your sensor is hidden deep inside the camera, and that's where your focal plane is. So wherever the sensor is, it's from there to the minimum focusing distance. Now this lens is 54mm deep, 5.4 centimeters. We've got a good 2 centimeters inside the camera before we get to the sensor. So we can say that we've got about 0.74 centimeter, about 0.74 of a meter, about 74 millimeters from the focal plane to there, and that should be in focus. So our focusing point is literally a centimetre or so in front of the lens, maybe 2 at the most. It's not very far. So that's our minimum focusing distance on this. Absolutely incredible. The lens itself, as I say, is all metal construction. It's really nice quality as well. It feels good. It's a little bit on the heavy side for a micro four thirds lens, but that's what you get with the metal construction. And the whole thing seems to be really nicely put together. As I say, both the focus and the aperture tend to be really nice. They're very, very smooth, no notchiness, and they just have a nice feel to them, nicely damped. Fits a treat on the camera, not too big on the camera. As I say, it's 54mm deep by 60 in diameter, so it is tiny. There is no ability to put filters on, because you'll find out in a second when I give you the specs. In fact, let's have a look at the specs now, as I say. It is a 4mm lens, and the 4mm is irrespective of what the system is. And I know I keep on getting somebody say, why do you keep on talking about the full frame equivalent? Well, full frame equivalent gives everybody who's watching this an idea as to what you would expect to see, if you, a common data point, if you like. So whether you're shooting APS-C or micro four thirds or full frame, you've got an idea what this would look like, because people are fairly used to what they've seen on full frames. That's the only reason. So it has a 4mm lens, which is an 8mm equivalent on full frame. Still a tiny, tiny lens insofar as focal length, and a very, very wide field of view. So let's have a look through the specs. 4mm, as I say. This one has the micro four thirds mount, but it's available in APS-C as well. Lens material is all metal construction. Weight 201 grams, so it's not the lightest lens on the market, but as I say, it's catering for APS-C bodies as well. The aperture ring is declicked, as it says, so in other words, there's nothing to tell you where the aperture is. It's totally smooth. And on the aperture itself, it's a 7-bladed aperture system, a 7-blade iris. Now, before I go on from here, don't read too much into this thing with the iris, because you're not going to be doing the super low bokeh. You're not going to be getting those wonderful bokeh balls in the background. So just bear in mind, that makes probably very little difference on this one. Optically, 10 elements in 8 groups. So it's a well thought out lens, well put together lens. For angle of view, this is the one which is the killer. If we imagine looking straight out to our right and straight out to our left and being able to see everything around, we've got a 180-degree view. This is 225, so you're looking back on yourself. You can actually see behind you with this lens. And that's fun, but it can cause problems too. Maximum aperture on this is f2.8, which really is good, is letting lots of light in. Minimum aperture f16. The focusing range, as I say, is 0.085 of a meter, or 8.5 centimeters, all the way out to infinity. And why I said about the focus on this is about the depth of field and things. You're not going to get much of a shallow depth of field, I should say. Your depth of field on a wide angle lens is inherently deep, and being a 4mm lens, this is very deep. Lens doesn't have IS in it, doesn't have any image stabilization. In fact, I'm just keep on looking down at the instruction sheet on this. I have to take photographs and put it on my iPad, because I just cannot read these instruction sheets anymore. They're so small, and it's printed black print on dark grey boxes. So I have to put it up here, put it a little bit bigger. But lens anti-shake. Without anti-shake, it says. I love that. I love the way that things translate. So the lens anti-shake is without anti-shake. Focusing method, as I say, is fully manual, and the filter size is non-installable. You can't fill filters, and there's no provision to put a filter on the back end of it. But in reality, there's not much really need for that to be happening. So the lens itself, really good construction. I really like the fact that it's well put together. Looking at prices, I haven't actually had the full retail price given to me by the manufacturers yet, but seeing the few sites which have it on sale in the UK at the moment, there seems to be about between 160 and 170 pounds UK. Now, to some people that might sound expensive, to some people it might sound inexpensive, but when I bought my very, very first fisheye lens for my Olympus OM1N in 1980, I was paying over £200 for a fisheye lens then. And, you know, that was more than the price of the camera body. If you consider this is less than that price now, 40 odd years later, this is inexpensive. It really is inexpensive. It's very, very easy to get to use. And it's a good little lens just to keep in your camera bag. But it's not for everyone. The lens itself in use is fabulous. You know, optically, well, let's have a look at optics, shall we? What's the best way? It's a fisheye lens. Get used to it. Right, that's a standard answer for the next few things. Distortion. It's a fisheye lens. Get used to it. Of course it distorts. You're trying to get a quart into a pint pot. You're pulling everything in from behind you right the way around and put it onto a tiny little sensor. There is no way to do that without squeezing everything in, and it distorts. But that's the beauty of this lens. It is there for an artistic and a creative use. It's not there to give an accurate representation of what we would see with our normal human eyes in our normal day-to-day life. It's doing a specific job, and it does it very well. So distortion, full of distortion, loads of it. Chromatic aberration. Well, you can see, you know, we're getting to the point where we've got a full circle, we've got darkness around, and where you're going to have the edges of the glass. Of course you're going to have some chromatic aberration. It's a fisheye lens. Get used to it. But it handles it very, very well for what it is. Vignetting. It's a fisheye lens. Of course it's going to vignette because you've got a nice, it's taking everything off the side and giving you a circle. Huge vignetting. But that's what it's meant to do. I mean, I'm taking the mickey a little bit on this, but the point is, it is there to do a set purpose, and these are things which we measure normal lenses and normal use against. This is not a normal lens, and it's not a normal use. This is a specific lens, and it's a very, very specific use for it. You could use it for videoing and things. It's probably not a great deal of use for that. Although if you want some special effects, it's ideal for that. And again, with that totally variable aperture, you might find that very, very useful on your camera if you're doing video work. As a selfie lens, well, as you can see, it's no good for a selfie lens. That distortion really does come into it a lot. Now, before I tell you what my big problem with this lens is, don't forget, if you haven't subscribed, hit below on the subscribe button. It's free. If you haven't subscribed yet, why not? Join the crew. A very happy bunch. 6,500 of us now, you know. If you want to give us a big thumbs up for this video, I really would appreciate that, because it gets YouTube's algorithms to spread it further and wider to more and more people. And if you do find this useful, there's a PayPal link below if you'd like to support the channel. Buy me a cup of coffee or whatever it is, and I just put it to help towards keeping the upkeep of this channel going. But let's get back to the review. Well, in use, it's great. I had it out this afternoon. I had wonderful fun. As I say, I had it on the AM1 Mark 1. I haven't taken this camera out for a little while, so I had to charge the batteries up. And I'll do a video about keeping batteries charged in the near future, but I had to get the batteries all charged up before I took it out. But it's a good camera to use it on. It's not too big, it's not too heavy, and it's well balanced on the camera itself. So you have to be very careful, because you forget that lens protrudes. So if you tend to keep it on a wrist strap like I do, especially with an older camera, I tend to just drop the camera a little bit and let it flop now and again. I know you shouldn't, but that's how I do it. You can't really do that with this thing sticking out. As soon as you do that, it's going to hit something. So you have to be that little bit more careful on this. One of the big problems I find when using something like this, where you're actually looking back on yourself, you've got to be so careful not to have things in shot which you don't expect. Now, just holding the camera like this with my fingers on the grip, you think be fine. But you'll see in a couple of shots that I've been putting up, you can see the fingers at the edge. It's actually far enough forward for my knuckles to be seen in shot. Again, if you're holding the camera like that, you'll find out you suddenly get your finger in shot there, or this one there. So you're ending up having to hold the camera very much like this, just to be able to get your shots. If you are rather a rotund person, on the slightly larger side like I am, you'll find that it's very easy to get your stomach showing in the camera. Need to lose some more weight, I think, before I take this lens out. It's very simple, because although it's 225 degrees side to side, it's it's 225 degrees all around. Because there's fisheye, you get a circular shot in this, and that's going to really show up everything. So it's 225 degrees from the top to bottom as well, which means you get an awful lot of feet in these sort of shots. So the only way I found to really use this camera effectively is to hold it in those sort of extremities, but also to use the viewfinder on the back. By the time you're using your eye viewfinder, you're so close, you're going to be almost bending over in front to avoid everything coming in. So really, hold it out a foot or so in front of you to be able to get the shot is about the only way I found to do it. It is fun. Is it a lens that you're going to use all the time? No. If you're thinking of a lens which is going to be your constant companion, please don't buy this one, because it's not going to do you any good on that. If you are wanting a lens which is going to supplement your creative skills, buy it. It's inexpensive. It really is inexpensive for a good quality lens. And it's a sort of thing that you may not use more than a couple of times, you know, a year almost. But when you do, it'll be the only thing you've got that can do those sort of shots. Any other lens is not going to give you the sort of shots that you get from this. So I would actually say it is a fabulous lens to keep in your collection, fabulous lens to have there, but don't be disappointed if you don't use it often. Now that might sound a little bit daft. Why would we possibly want to buy a lens which we're not going to use very often? But we're happily doing it at the other end of the scale, unless you're doing short sports or bird photography or wildlife where you're using very long lenses all the time. A lot of us will go out and buy a long telephoto zoom lens. I've got my 100 to 300 Lumix, and it's a great lens, but I probably don't use it more than a few times a year. It sits in the bag and it's big and heavy, but I need something which is really long zoomed in and super compressed, then I'll get that lens out, and it's worth its weight in gold at that time. So it's not a strange concept to have a lens which you don't use often, but a specialty lens is well worth having there. Now, you might consider it to be quite expensive, but I actually think that for the amount of R&D which goes into these lenses and specialist tooling which needs to be set up just for this lens, because it's not the sort of thing which can be used from other lens bodies. You have to put this lens together from scratch. I tend to find that it's really good value for money because, you know, to do this, they're not going to be selling millions of these lenses. These lenses are not going to be the ones which go out the door in the same way as a 14 to 42 zoom would be going out. They will sell millions of those lenses. These ones, if they sell more than a few 100,000, I'd be amazed. But those few 100,000 will be used for this specialist reason. However, normally that would cost a fortune to do. And I think for about 160, 170 pounds UK, I think this is cheap as chips and really good value for money. This is the first lens I've tried from 7Artisans, but I've seen a few people doing reviews on some of their other lenses, and they've always came out really, really good, both quality of optics-wise and quality of build. And this lens, for me, is no different. I'm over the moon with the lens quality. I'm over the moon with the image quality. I can't knock either. And I think that if you're in the market for a fisheye lens, this is the one to go for. Automation, not really needed. Manual lens will do the job perfectly well on any of your Micro Four Thirds cameras. Now, if you remember, I did a review of a TT Artisan 50mm lens recently, and I said about how difficult it was to focus on the Olympus with the focus peaking. That's not really a problem on this one, because this depth of field is so vast, and even at f2.8, it's still so vast. You're not really going to worry about focusing at all. Today, unless I was really focusing in on something right close in front, when I did that shot of my eye, my eyelashes were touching the lens. For that, then I needed to knock the focusing down a little bit. But the rest of the time, I was leaving it on infinity and I was getting everything pin sharp. So this is it. 7Artisans 4mm f2.8 lens. I think it's a winner. I personally think go out and get it. I wouldn't be in the least bit upset about recommending it to anybody, and I'm looking forward to getting more and more shots with this one. So until the next time, this is Brian James at Micro Four Thirds guy saying, keep on taking your lenses out, keep on taking your camera out, and keep on having fun with your photography. See ya. Bye-bye.